One, Donald Trump calls for the execution of Liz Cheney just 3 days before the election, while the Federal Communications Department says that NBC violated the equal time, equal fairness doctrine. And Barack Obama once again says Donald Trump called Nazis very fine people. No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what happens in the race for the president, this election should be the end. It should be the death knell of legacy mainstream media. 2, swimming, drowning in poll numbers. Where are we today? What's happening in Pennsylvania with early voting? Is Georgia outpacing 2020 and promises a win for Donald Trump? Are women breaking heavily for Kamala Harris? We will try not to drown, but tread in the water of polls. 3, Jason Chaffetz, Trey Gowdy, Pete Hegseth, pollster Lee Carter, Jessica Tarlov of The Five. A massive show today to get you ready for the election here on The Will Cain Show. It is The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Terrestrial radio market to market, always on demand by subscribing at Apple or on Spotify. Live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. You can head over, and as you should, and hit subscribe. There's a text description underneath this live stream. Within that text description, you'll see a little button that says Will Cain Show. Head over there and hit subscribe, set up a reminder. Why? Because this week we will be doing jam-packed jumbo editions of The Will Cain Show, anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. Starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, I'll be broadcasting live from North Carolina, Concord, North Carolina, the sweet spot for a 2-hour edition of The Will Cain Show from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time. So set your reminders, subscribe, and then you'll be here with us, and you can drop into the comments section and become a member of the Willisha. Speaking of the comment section, polls are just hitting me left and right in the temples and in the ears, and it's hard to see which ones should break through to my brain. I know you feel the same way. Kamala, Trump, neck and neck, tie, blowout, landslide, Nate Silver, Rasmussen. I don't know what to make of anything, and that's going to be my job for the next hour and a half, again, in a jumbo-packed edition of The Will Cain Show. But as I was scrolling across my feed moments before joining you today, I saw a poll from who I don't know. The veracity, I'm not sure, that said that Donald Trump was losing Hispanics by a margin of 30 to 65 or so. The suggestion on this post and who published it doesn't matter for the moment, but was that the Puerto Rican joke at the Madison Square Garden rally was racist, not humorous, according to most of the poll respondents, thus explaining the break for Hispanics. I just happened to scroll down into the comments under this post, and I saw someone, again, who it does not matter for the moment, that said it wasn't the joke, it was the overall Nazi fascist rally at Madison Square Garden that turned off Hispanics. At which point I set down my phone and I rubbed my temples and I said, what is going on? I was there. There was literally nothing from the podium, nothing from a speech, nothing in the atmospherics that could validate any idea that what you saw that day was in any way affiliated to Nazis. But that's what breaks through. Will, don't define the world according to the comments section on X. I know. But you tell me, when you run into your neighbor at a backyard barbecue, when you're talking outside of church, how much of people's minds are made up by echoes and repetition and just abstractions that come away? Now, here's why I'm bringing this up today, because most of that is created through one of two mechanisms: social media. I saw this on Facebook, or through mainstream media that drives, again, through echoes and repetitions, ideas, abstractions. Donald Trump is a fascist. Maybe even Kamala Harris is a communist. That really doesn't allow for anything deeper to break through. What we're looking at right now, I would hope, in the next couple of days, is the absolute last gasp, death rattle of legacy mainstream media to create those reverberations and those echoes. Let me explain to you why with story number one. Late last week, Thursday night, which bled into a news cycle of over Friday and Saturday, Donald Trump sat down with Tucker Carlson, and he talked about the endorsement of Liz Cheney for Kamala Harris. Here are the words of Donald Trump.
And I don't blame him for sticking with his daughter, but his daughter is a very dumb individual, very dumb. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person.
I think that any sane person, any rational person listening to that understands the point that is being made. It's about chicken hawking. It's about warmongering. He's making a point that has been made for honestly half a century, and most oftentimes by Democrats, that if you're so ready to vote for war, maybe you should be willing to fight in a war. Did he use evocative imagery? Absolutely. He talked about Liz Cheney essentially being on the battle lines, on the front lines with 9. He since talked about maybe a dozen, 20, whatever, rifles pointed at her. But the point that he is making is maybe put your mouth or your money where your mouth is. Put your body on the line where your mouth is. Maybe fight the wars that you so readily beat the drums. So that was turned into the mainstream media, suggesting that Donald Trump was calling for the execution of Liz Cheney. In my mind, I've never heard of firing squads giving the condemned a rifle to fire back. I don't know how they did this, and they don't know how they did this. Well, they know how they did it because it wasn't an accident. It wasn't misinterpretation. It wasn't anything. It was just simply malevolent. Let's use their word, misinformation. Let's use my word, lies and propaganda. And of course, it was echoed from the highest seats of power. The sitting vice president of the United States and the current presidential candidate of the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris.
And then, even worse, he has increased his violent rhetoric, Donald Trump has, about political opponents, and in great detail, suggested rifles should be trained on former Representative Liz Cheney.
Those headlines rang out then. Drudge Report. Trump calls for execution of Liz Cheney. Of course, CNN, New York Times, violent imagery, you name it, Washington Post. As we talked about a moment ago, echoes and reverberations have begun. The backyard barbecue narrative has been set. And it's hard at that point for the truth to ever break through. You want to know the power? Here's the power, okay? Twists and turns, misinformation, lies and propaganda create an impenetrable situation that now defines the truth in people's minds. You want to know exactly how? And it's not mistake. Again, let's reiterate. It's not mistake. It's malevolent. It's propaganda. And there's been no better illustration of the power of what you just saw happen than the one that's been persistent for, I guess it would be now 8 years, 7, 8 years. I think one of the most, impactful, but also malevolent hoaxes in decades. I give you very fine people, and I give you Barack Obama.
Maybe you're Muslim American or Jewish American, and you are heartbroken and furious about the ongoing bloodshed in the Middle East and worried about the rise of anti-Semitism. Why would you place your faith in somebody who instituted a so-called Muslim ban, who sat down for pleasantries with Holocaust deniers, who said that there were very fine people on both sides of a white supremacist rally?
He's not confused. He is not confused, and he is not dumb. He is perpetuating a hoax, a lie, propaganda, and he's doing it 7, 8 years after it's been proven false. He's doing it so that he can control the echoes and reverberations and backyard narratives so that you vote a certain way based upon a fantasy. On Saturday night, Kamala Harris appeared on Saturday Night Live. That's a violation of the FCC's equal time requirement. This applies to broadcast networks, not to cable networks. But it should be pointed out that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have been invited, for example, on the cable network Fox on numerous occasions. The reason you don't see them is because of declined invitations to be on Fox. But if you're a broadcast network on a public spectrum, licensed, you're required to adhere to giving political candidates equal time. That didn't matter to Saturday Night Live and NBC. They gave Kamala Harris time without inviting Donald Trump. FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr tweeted out the following about this. He said that this is a clear violation. He said this is a clear violation to evade the FCC's equal time rule. The purpose of this rule is to avoid exactly the type of biased and partisan conduct a licensed broadcaster using public airwaves to influence an election in the support of one candidate, unless the broadcaster offered equal time to other qualifying campaigns. That's Brendan Carr of the FCC. He went on, by the way, to explain exactly the FCC.gov rules and how it was violated. What it resulted in is Donald Trump, apparently, within a minute and a half last night on NBC's Sunday night during NASCAR and Sunday night football coverage, a minute and a half ad. But the point is larger. It's that you are being manipulated with falsehoods and bias, and you're getting it done from the highest levels of power and the licensed airwaves of broadcast media. In a bit of a bright spot today, YouTube has chosen not to bend to the will of a partnership between Media Matters and the New York Times, targeting 30-plus conservative YouTubers for misinformation. This has nothing to do with COVID. It's all about, changing election laws, news items of debate. They attempted to get YouTube to demonetize all these people, from Ben Shapiro to Michael Knowles. And YouTube has decided not to. That is a bright spot. But whether or not we're talking about broadcast networks like CBS editing 60 Minutes or NBC violating the FCC rules or perpetuating absolute lies that Donald Trump wants to have, the execution of Liz Cheney, what we think is possible, regardless of the outcome, I think, tomorrow, is the total loss of credibility and the death rattle last gasp breath, the death knell, I hope, of legacy mainstream media. Now, a part of that fantasy is polling. Who's winning, who's losing. Let's see if we can break through some of that fantasy, see reality, see if we can tread water, swim to the top while we're drowning in numbers. And we're going to do that with former Congressman Jason Chaffetz and former Congressman Trey Gowdy next on The Will Cain Show. Early voting compared to 2020 looks very bad in Pennsylvania for Democrats. But turnout for women in Pennsylvania looks very good for Kamala Harris. Let's break it all down here on The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube or Apple or Spotify, because tomorrow we have a special jumbo edition. 2 hours, 10 a.m., though, is our kickoff time, so 2 hours earlier than normal here on The Will Cain Show, as I'll come to you live from the sweet spot in Concord, North Carolina, for 2 hours from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you subscribe to The Will Cain Show. I don't know. I literally do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. People ask me all the time, Will, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And I guess, I would tell you this, after I've swam in every single kind of poll, and all they do is make me more confused, that I would say if I were my best guesstimate, if I were forced to place some money, I would go 55-45 Donald Trump. Let's see how that holds up with two former congressmen. Congressman Jason Chaffetz, by the way, is also the host of Jason in the House podcast. He's the author of The Puppeteers. That's a new book, relatively new book, which you should go check out. He's the former chair of the House Oversight Committee, and he is from Utah. And Trey Gowdy is the host of the Trey Gowdy podcast. While you're here at Fox News Podcast, you can subscribe to Jason in the House and the Trey Gowdy podcast, but you can also see Trey on Sunday night in America on the Fox News channel. And because everybody writes books, Trey did as well. Start, Stay, or Leave, The Art of Decision Making. The only idiot, by the way, also chair of the House Oversight Committee, He's was a congressman from South Carolina. The only idiot at Fox News that hasn't written a book is the host of the Will Cain Show. It's Will Cain.
Hey, Will, if it makes
better, what am I doing?
If it makes you feel better, Jason has not read a book. He may have written 3, but he hasn't read one yet, if that makes you feel better.
That's awesome. I just want to get a ghostwriter, Jason. I'm going to get a ghostwriter, and I'm going to say,
I can help you.
Here's a few thoughts. Go write me a bestseller.
We aspire to be at your level. We're still the guys wearing ties. Uh-huh. We aspire to be the ones that don't have to wear the ties.
Well, you don't. You just did because, these guys were buddies back in Congress. I don't know them as well, but, you didn't have to. This is a relaxed environment, Jason. Like, you can relax. This is like, let's take it back to the kicking days. BYU kicker, Jason. That's the one-on-one on the Will Cain Show.
The most important person on the field. Never lost a game by the margin of my missed kicks.
What does that even mean? Nobody even knows what that means. Never lost a game by the margin of one of your missed kicks.
You went to law school? You can't figure that one out?
Means. I know what it means, Gowdy. I've got a kicker in my family, my son. And when I just hope that it never comes down to a 3 or less point differential in the game. On the negative side, I look at if you miss a kick and you lost by 10, that's not the kicker's fault. But If you miss a kick and you lost by 2, now you got to worry about what the parents are saying in the stands.
And then you can't run for Congress in that place, in that district.
He had Ty Detmer, Robbie Bosco. He had all these great quarterbacks. All he had to do was get the 7th point. Somebody else got the first 6. Just get the 7th.
Just because my guy, Ty Detmer, won the Heisman Trophy doesn't mean I wasn't the best kicker there had ever been.
Oh, my gosh. Been.
Did you score more points? Do you have more collegiate points on the record books than Ty Detmer?
I was the leading scorer on the team. He goes on the next year and wins the Heisman Trophy. What's up with that?
Exactly.
I feel totally ripped off. Totally ripped off.
Wow.
Guys, you heard me. Right now, if I was forced, 55-45 Trump. And we'll get into some best we can, read some tea leaves. But, Trey, where are you right now? Like, how would you read it?
Well, I never thought I won a trial. I never thought I won an election. I am, by nature, I don't want to say I'm a cynic. I think I'm a stoic. I like to act like I am losing all the time. I would have liked to have seen a little different closing argument. You and I are both lawyers. I think whenever you're spending your closing argument explaining what someone else said, that's not your best piece of evidence. So the fact that he's in North Carolina and Georgia, Republicans should have had those states wrapped up, I think, weeks ago. Having said that, it depends on where the undercount is. Remember in 2022, we were expecting a red wave. We didn't get it because they undercounted single females. I just don't know where the undercount is this year.
Jason? More positive than Trey or similar level of, I wouldn't call that cynicism, by the way. Trey, I think my bearing is actually very similar to you. I'm an optimist. I don't think you could do what I do for a living or have led the life that I live if I didn't believe it's all going to work out in the end. But I kind of undergird my optimism with what I believe is realism, but probably comes off as pessimism. I'm always preparing for the loss. Yes. That way, the point is to try to ensure I don't get the loss. But Jason, how do you feel today about the race?
I think from the Donald Trump viewpoint, I think he couldn't be in a better spot. I think he's run a brilliant campaign. Yeah, I would say different things, different ways. We all would. I think he's going to win. I think he's going to win handily. I think he'll actually get north of 300 electoral votes.
Wow.
I see, in part because he's got a strong message. More than 2/3 of the country believes we're off track. They want to change. And the fundamentals of Kamala Harris's closing argument aren't there. Your thesis in your conclusion has to be consistent with the reality. And hers is so far the absolute opposite of that. People concerned about the economy, that goes to Donald Trump. People concerned about the border, safety, security, overseas. At the end of the day, what does she bring to the table except people who are saying, hey, I'm pro-abortion? She's going to get that crowd, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's so big and such a massive amount of people that she can get to the finish line. But I just find that she's almost like an empty suit, and she doesn't have anything to point to.
Let's play the pessimism game. I'm going to do what I'm inclined to do and what Trey already began. Okay, I'll put it back at you, Jason, and Trey. You can jump in on this as well. But you just said 300, which anyone would say is a landslide victory for Donald Trump. I'm concerned about two things, and I noticed them like Trey. I'm a little surprised at how much time is being spent in North Carolina. I really am, Jason. And that makes me think you're on defense, not offense. I would think that you'd be in Pennsylvania. Now, he's everywhere, and I know how much energy he has, and he goes, but I'm just a little surprised at the resources dedicated to North Carolina, which suggests to me, I thought that's one you already had in the bag.
Yeah, but he's also spending time in New Mexico. He's spending time in Virginia. I thought that was interesting that Biden went to New Hampshire. I think he got the other thing that I think you have to look at in politics, which is accretive, is you have to look at the down ballot, because oftentimes it's those organizations that will drive voter turnout. Give a lot of credit to Steve Daines, the senator from Montana who led the effort. The Senate candidates for Republicans is far superior than previous elections. And you can go right across the board from David McCormick to Sheehy's in Montana. That's off the board, not even close at this point. You got Sam Brown out in Nevada. You start looking at the Senate candidates, and they're really good. And then you look in New Hampshire, Kelly Ayotte running for governor. She's like one of my favorite people. I love Kelly Ayotte. She's going to be the next governor, and she's running as a Republican, and I think that helps.
All right.
Okay, Trey, so let me challenge you. Real quick, Trey. What about this theory? I just saw it. Okay, the reason that Donald Trump is spending time in North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania is that if he can square those up on election night, then it's over. 270.
True.
And this doesn't drag into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
True.
So what he's focused on, I just saw this theory, is win those three convincingly so that we don't spend Thursday and Friday counting votes in Wisconsin and Michigan and all these others. That's why he's focused on those three states.
True. I would also remind you, Georgia has 2 Democrat senators in must-win races. You remember back when literally control of the Senate hung in the balance, and Republican incumbent senators lost both runoffs. For the first time, I think, ever, Republicans had lost a runoff in Georgia. So Georgia has a Republican governor, but the former president has quarreled with Brian Kemp in the past. Mark Robinson is a millstone around the neck of Donald Trump in North Carolina. I mean, what an awful candidate to be running alongside. Pennsylvania, as you know, Will, is really 2 urban areas with Texas in the middle. And the question is, who can motivate their voters to get out? And my point about the closing argument, if you and I were litigating this case, our 2 best pieces of evidence are the fact that you've had 3 years to do whatever the next thing that comes out of your mouth is. You've already had 3 years and you haven't done it. And most of the country thinks we're headed in the wrong direction. And yet he is having to waste time defending what an alleged comedian said in New York or what some former employee alleged about him. It wasn't the crescendo that I had hoped, and I'm sure he had hoped that he would have as a closing argument.
But she's having to do the same thing, though, with Joe Biden. She's having to kind of either distance herself or defend herself from garbage from Joe Biden.
Yeah, she's talking about turning the page, and he's flipping back to the table of contents because he doesn't know when to exit stage left or right. So neither candidate had the closing argument. But if you believe the polls, and I'm not a big poll watcher, but the late-breaking voters seem to be breaking towards her. The question is why? If that's true, the question is why. I've been worried about the gender gap every guest I have on my show. I ask Elise, 12-point gender cap. If you could just shrink that a little bit, then you might have the electoral landslide that Jason's talking about.
But I also see Donald Trump he's doing so much
You're
better.
the optimist, Jason. I almost like this. Jason, you're playing the role of the optimist. Trey's playing the role of the pessimist. So I'm going to gear the questions, and sorry to interrupt you there, Jason, but I'm going to gear them in this way. So I think that you do, as an optimist, have to answer to the other thing Trey's alluding to, and that's the women thing. It's if Mark Halperin has said that, early returns are 55% women. That's good news for Kamala Harris, right? And if this is an election about women, that's a win for Kamala Harris.
I'm not buying that. I'm not buying it. I think if abortion is your number one issue, yes. But I think a lot of women are concerned about safety, security. They're the ones going to the grocery store. They're taking their kids to Five Guys, and they're taking their kids to McDonald's, and it's expensive. When you are 20% more expensive than you were 4 years ago, and your candidate has no explanation what to do with it, and you also are worried about safety and security on the national stage, the world stage, and in your own backyard, when your kids have 6 new people in their classroom who don't speak English, and that's slowing down the classroom, mom deals with those issues oftentimes. So I'm not buying this idea that all these women just go to Kamala Harris because she's a woman. I think that's too simplistic.
I actually don't think it's all abortion, Will. I think in the aftermath of Dobbs, I think if you were to have Donald Trump on your podcast, his position on the issue of abortion is probably in the mainstream of where most Americans are. But in the aftermath, we watch state after state after state go to the right of where he is, and most of those initiatives lost. So you would think Republicans would figure out, I'm not talking about women who are out there in pink protesting. I'm talking about women who should be Trump supporters, but they are not happy with what state legislative bodies have done. I mean, I really don't know anyone who thinks rape victims should be imprisoned for having an abortion after they were the victim of rape. But you have state legislative bodies that are pushing that, and I think they're hurting Trump in the process, even though that's not his position.
You know, I do wonder, is it about what's happening at the state level and how much those bleed up to the national election? Or, look, and I don't mean to be somebody who makes something overly simplistic, but you just said, Trey, which is right, that Donald Trump's position on abortion is within the mainstream of America, and one could say the furthest left position of a Republican nominee for president since, what, Nixon? I mean, maybe Reagan. He is more centrist / position to the left on abortion than any Republican running since I was allowed to vote. I will tell you that. But I don't think the average person knows that, Trey. Right. I think they think he's for a national abortion ban. And that's what I'm getting at. It's like the media plays this role, and most people don't have a rudder dug deep down in the water to guide their ship. They're floating along. You know, he had a Nazi rally at MSG. He's for a national abortion ban. And I think, unfortunately, that, like, and Jason, I'm worried all that, you know, just the wind that push women in that way think Donald Trump, and it's not just about abortion, is a bore. They don't like his personality. And even though those kitchen table issues matter to them, they can't hold their nose and vote for Donald Trump. I'm worried that could be the case when it comes to women, Jason.
I think those are all legitimate arguments and areas of concern for the campaign. You know, it's that last 5% that much rather be watching The Simpsons and Wheel of Fortune all day. They're not watching, you know, the Fox News day in and day out and following it online. And then, you know, hey, it's time to vote, time to vote, time to vote. But what is yet to be seen is, can they take, for instance, people of faith, people who believe in the Second Amendment, who vote in surprisingly low numbers, can they get them converted and actually to the polls and registered to vote and do that? And it does appear in these early numbers that perhaps that is actually happening in mass. I think the message, to Trey's point, in Georgia is far different. Look, Trump was out there consistently saying it's a fraud. They're stealing the election, and that suppressed a lot of people. Brian Kemp got 100,000 more votes than Donald Trump. But now they've kind of kissed and made up, and they're doing pretty well together. And the president's been singing the song of, hey, let's get out and vote early. Yeah, okay, we should all be voting same day, same information in person with the voter ID. But we got to play by the rules right now. The other thing that has fundamentally changed from last time, from even just 2 years ago, is social media. Elon Musk, X, the ability to go out and communicate on big podcasts like Joe Rogan and whatnot, you're getting to tens of millions of people that Republicans, quite frankly, could never communicate with previously. And I think that actually does have an effect.
So, Trey, I think if you guys were actually litigating a case right now and you were on opposite sides, I think that Jason's best piece of evidence for optimism is the early returns. Now, we're not even talking about polling, right? I was in Georgia on Friday. And, I mean, it's stunning numbers. What is it? 3.6 million Georgians voted compared to 2.3 million in 2020, heavily indexing towards Republicans. In Pennsylvania, the early voting suggests, Democrats have a big lead, but it's like dramatically less than it was in 2020. By close, 700,000 less of a differential between Democrats and Republicans than in 2020. So like when you look at these early states, it just looks like Republicans have done the job to play ball when it comes to early voting.
Yes, it highlights the fact that Republicans made a mistake by not encouraging people to embrace what was obvious. If you want to fight against early voting, that's fine. But once you lose the fight, you shouldn't discourage people from doing it.
Right.
What I don't know, Will, is how many of these folks were same-day voters that just decided to vote Republican early. That's what I don't know.
So
I don't
I've
know
asked that. Trey, I've asked that a lot because that's the concern. Did you just cannibalize your election day vote, right? And you know, I think we all should be like this. I'm skeptical because everybody, it's like, you know, I was in sports for 5 years, and one of the most famous figures for about a hot minute was LeVar Ball, right? LeVar Ball is the father of LaMelo Ball and all there's three Ball brothers, but his whole thing was speak it into existence, right? If you just keep saying his son is the best basketball player ever, then he becomes the best basketball player ever. Right. So I'm skeptical of all these people telling me this, Trey, but they're telling me, no, it's low propensity voters or first-time voters. It's not a cannibalization. That's like local Republican officials that I meet at diners in various states and so forth, because I've had the same concern. I don't know if what they're telling me is true, but if it is, it's good for Donald Trump.
Yes, if they are correct, that these are new voters that wouldn't vote for anybody else, not Scott Perry, not in the Senate race, they're just coming out because of Donald Trump. Yes, that's very good news because I don't think that Trump can win without Pennsylvania. If, on the other hand, it's just the folks that in the past resisted early voting because Republicans, frankly, resisted it, then all you've done is just swap what you get Tuesday, getting it a month early. And I don't know the answer to that. And I would call you and I stoics more than I would pessimists. We're realists with a dash of stoicism. You mentioned abortion, Will. The best opportunity that the president had was during his one debate with Kamala Harris. She keeps talking about Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade does not say a word about late-term abortion. It doesn't say a word about not notifying parents. He allowed her to present herself as being less than radical on that issue. It's really not him that is radical on that issue. Anyone who believes in partial birth abortion or not notifying parents is radical. But that opportunity slipped through the fingers. I think on that question, he may have pivoted to student loans. I don't know how you go from abortion to student loans. I really don't. But I think he pivoted to it.
All right. So, this is the big day. Tomorrow is the big day. This is the last day to read the tea leaves. I love that I have two different perspectives from two different guys who did this for many, many years. But I'm still left where I begin this conversation. I don't know. I don't know which one of you are right. Jason's very confident, 300. Trey's going to not give me a prediction, but I can feel his pessimism.
I never thought I won a trial or an election, Will. I never thought I won.
That's because
did you ever think you did.
You know what?
Tests?
Well, you need to know this about Trey Gowdy. He always won his cases, but then he said the quiet part out loud one time. He said, "Well, yeah, if I'm going to lose, I just plead out." You know,
can't plead out an election.
That's. A prosecutor should win
a
case.
Good. He's really good. But he was also really good
and
always understood that I might lose here, so we're going to go ahead and go with manslaughter.
You know, Jason, to that point, it's like kicking an extra point, Jason. You don't get credit for kicking an extra point, but you get a lot of criticism if you miss an extra point. A prosecutor getting a guilty conviction is sort of what's supposed to happen. When you have the power of the government behind you, you should be getting that.
You're right.
You know, if you're batting... If you're batting 70% as a prosecutor, it's like being 70% on extra points.
But you should also run scared all the time. You should run like you are behind. You should run through the tape like someone is chasing you. And I don't know whether people made up their minds in the last week or not. But if you and I were scripting it, you know, you and I both, I mean, Donald Trump doesn't pick the comedian at his rallies. He doesn't pick the first 30 speakers. But the media is always looking for something to harp on, and Republicans have to be smarter about not giving it to them. So we can blame the media, but Ronald Reagan ran into
I do disagree with you a little bit on that.
Sure.
I really kind of, because here's my, Here's why I disagree, Trey. I think they would have created something out of nothing. It doesn't matter what the something is. Yes, Tony Hinchcliffe gave a little bit of a layup for them to create something, but the fact that he was like the first 3 speakers in a lineup of, as you pointed out, 20 to 30 speakers, 8 hours before Donald Trump takes the stage, it's just evidence of the fact that they would have created something. And if it hadn't have been Hinchcliffe, it would have been something else to reaffirm.
But we
Look
know
at they just
that.
had a Nazi rally at MSG.
But we know that. Reagan had a headwind. Bush had a headwind. When you run for governor of Texas, you're going to have a headwind. Republicans are going to have a headwind no matter what. The question is, what gifts do we give them to provide that headwind? If I'm Donald Trump, I don't mind having to explain something I said. That's fine. But I'd be doggone if I'm going to explain something somebody else said. I'll bet you if you put him on a polygraph, he would say, I wish that we had made the news for something I had said, not something someone else said.
Oh, yeah.
They need to talk
Oh,
more
he's
about
mad.
They need to talk
sure.
more about Peanut is what they need to do. I mean, Peanut is everywhere. Is it Frank? Is the
Gowdy,
other one?
are you
Frank is
active-
the raccoon?
You know what? I feel bad for Frank, Jason. Frank really is not getting the attention he deserves. I
He
don't even know
died
what happened.
too.
I don't know
He
if this
died
is
for his country.
Is this a racial? Is this a species thing, like a race thing? Like we don't care about raccoons, but we care about squirrels? I don't even understand the public totally ignoring Frank in this whole deal.
He gave his
Gowdy,
life
are you
for the
active
country.
Are you on X, Gowdy?
No, I'm not on social media.
Active? Okay, do you even know what Jason's talking about with Peanut?
I have no idea.
Seriously, you have no idea?
No idea. I know that Dallas is awful and South Carolina beat A&M. Those 2 things I can tell you.
Okay, we're going to wind up with that in a second, but I find this fascinating. Jason, of course, Saturday was hilarious. I don't usually get into memes and that kind of thing. The Peanut thing was out of this world hilarious. But I did talk to a friend that's like, my entire X feed was dominated by Peanut, and then I went over to Apple News and nothing. We got to recognize it's a gigantic bubble that has nothing to do with what's going on in the real world. Gowdy, Peanut is a pet squirrel who was a star on TikTok, and the New York, I don't know what Bureau of Department Environmental Resources raided their home and took Peanut the squirrel and Frank the raccoon away from this couple and then euthanized them because they were testing them for rabies. And this guy goes to social media. And the key component is somebody put out a fake Donald Trump statement championing Peanut. And then before you know it, it's off and running, baby. I mean, Donald Trump is the champion of pets. They're killing the pets now. They're killing squirrels.
Hey,
It was hilarious.
Can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
What's TikTok?
Yeah. Shut, Gowdy, don't overdo it. I buy that you're not on social media. Don't overdo it.
I am here to
not on
attest
social
that he
media.
is that inept when it comes to social issues. I can promise you.
I
Will.
know Dallas is awful and the Gamecocks won. That's
They're
what
awful.
I know. They're awful. You should
Awful.
buy the
I don't
team,
even.
Will.
I even actually forgot about kickoff. I was like, I'm a one football team guy right now. I'm Longhorns only. That's what I pay attention to. And I appreciate the Gamecocks taking down.
And who coaches?
Aggies
Who
this week.
coach? By the way, who coaches the Longhorns?
Steve Sarkisian.
Who played at?
Because he was with you at BYU?
He was a BYU quarterback. And I'm sure he
So
was
you
the
had
second
Detmer-
leading scorer after the I didn't know him. I never played with him, but I'm sure the kicker outdid him.
Oh, I was going to say, you're dunking on Detmer and Sarkisian today, Jason Chaffetz, BYU.
No, I'm taking him as
real
my
quick before we
own.
go. Do you have the school record for points? Not just for that season, but a
I
kicker,
had-
theoretically.
I had 5 school records.
Where are you?
I'm down to 2. Most extra points made
And
in
most
a game.
penalties. Most unsportsmanlike penalty. Taking his helmet off and shaking his hair loose after
I
a
did
made
do
extra
that
point.
If I made the kick, I did take off my helmet. Yes, it did do that.
How about that?
And they now have a rule
But you still
against
have
that.
most extra points?
In
You
a
have most
game-
extra points in what?
in a game, and then most attempted and most made 10 in a game, which is really I had to
Okay.
beg Lavelle Edwards.
And he
to
has
keep me
one
in the
other
game.
record, too, Will, that he's not telling you. The longest 5-minute
is it?
speech in the history of Congress. It lasted an hour and 20 minutes. You only get 5 minutes. His was an hour and 20-minute, 5-minute speech.
We would start a hearing.
You gave
and
a
I'm
Trump
the
rally
chairman.
on the floor.
We would start a meeting, and I'm the chairman, and he'd say, parliamentary procedure. And normally you look at the Democrats. No, Trey Gowdy's got to interrupt, start asking questions. Oh, we'll have to come back and tell war stories of that stuff.
I would love, just getting ready to say, I would love to have you two on together again. I can't get Gowdy to make a presidential prediction, but if I had, this would be a great game. BYU, South Carolina right now. Would you feel more confident in South Carolina, Gowdy? Because BYU's undefeated.
Where are we playing? Williams-Brice, or are we playing in the snow in Provo or Salt Lake City or wherever BYU is? If we're playing in Columbia, I like our chances. If we're playing out in Utah, we're going to get Mountain West officials. We're going to get a bunch of bad calls like we did against LSU. We probably can't overcome that.
Oh. Your boys can't get on a bus? We can only play at home as long as mom's feeding us breakfast? Give me a break.
We don't want Mountain West
cold.
Officials. We don't. What league are you on?
What
Big
kind
12?
of wimpy team do you have?
Big 12?
We don't play unless it's 60. Come on.
It's the Southeastern
Gowdy
Conference.
Gowdy setting himself up to question the results of an outcome based upon the officiating. Interesting. That's not what I had you for today, and I don't know that you're going to do that when it comes to the other big contests of the week.
No, I won't do that then because I don't know the officiating, although I hope it's not like a ACC crew or whoever called our LSU game. I will say this. I think Republicans take the Senate, so I don't know, even if Kamala Harris wins, if you look at who's up for re-election in 2026, Will, they are Republican senators that have had kind of a mixed history with Trump. I think she has a hard time getting her cabinet through a Republican Senate. So even if she wins, there's a stopgap on her agenda.
Didn't hear a prediction right there.
Okay, and then just wind it up, Jason. To bring it home for us, Jason, since Trey gave us the Senate, you feel good about the House? I actually saw a betting market move. It looked like towards Democrats when it came to the House.
It's really hard to tell in the House. I mean, I'd love to say, hey, I'm all full of optimism, but these races are really local issues. On election night, I think you look at Lawler. How is that race going in New York? That's a big one. Huge money spent in that race. If Republicans win that, Lawler's ahead and winning handsomely, I think that's a canary in the coal mine about what's going to happen across the country. I think that's a bellwether race. But it's so hard to tell. In California, Ken Calvert, some of these races, it's really hard to tell what's going to happen.
You won't know till Thanksgiving, I don't think, who these races, honestly.
Man.
Arizona, come on.
All right, the host of the Trey Gowdy podcast, you're over here, you're listening, you're in the digital space, so head over there and subscribe to the Trey Gowdy podcast. And while you're there, Jason in the House podcast. Hit subscribe, pick up both their books, The Puppeteers from Jason Chaffetz, Start, Stay, or Leave from Trey Gowdy, and check out Trey on Sunday Night in America. This has been awesome. I really appreciate the time you guys gave me today. I hope we can do it again.
Hook 'em horns. Thank you.
Hook 'em horns. That's big from a Baylor Bear, Trey Gowdy. All right, that's an awesome start to this jumbo-packed show. I hope he's sticking around because he is my buddy, and I kept him waiting. But coming up next on the Will Cain Show, Fox and Friends weekend co-host Pete Hegseth. The last report card came in, and at least according to one analyst, it is for Biden-Harris an F. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Jump into the comments, hit subscribe, and you can come into the show. Big Caesar says, I'm worried about her returns with women. They are turning out in big numbers for her, and we need to be concerned, meaning she's doing well with women. But Guy Truth says, economy and open borders is what is getting out the vote. Safety for kids, like in Virginia. Moms will vote for schools to stop CRT and trans. And then finally, the Ship's Cat says, even a small grocery shop costs a bloody fortune now. Just a basket of items, it's gone loco. It's a question about whether or not women break for Kamala Harris. Let's break it down with my Fox and Friends weekend co-host, Pete Hegseth. He joins us now on the Will Cain Show. Of all the book writers, you're looking now at the #1 book writer, bestseller at Fox News. I bring that up, Pete, because we just had Jason Chaffetz and Trey Gowdy on, and everybody's talking about their book, and I'm the only idiot that hasn't written a book, and now I'm with, like, the king of books, Pete Hegseth.
That I am definitely not. You will write a book, and I'll take 10% when you do. Just let me know. It'll be I just want to know what the topic's going to be. I mean, you're such a Renaissance man. You've done so many different things. I want to know where you're going to throw down. Could be anything.
Me too. Me too. Me too. I want to know the topic. I mentioned to Fox News or an analyst that gave the Biden-Harris administration an F as Kamala Harris is running for president. That analyst is you. This weekend in talking to Donald Trump on Fox and Friends Weekend, we were talking about the jobs numbers. The October numbers come in at 12,000 jobs added. Bad. And I think just as importantly, September and August revised down. Yet again, another revision down in the jobs numbers. Trey Gowdy's concerned, as he just laid out for us, about Donald Trump's closing message, that he's on defense, defending things like a comedian at MSG. It's clear what he wants his closing argument to be, Pete. He wants it to be economy. And this jobs report certainly gave him ammunition for the economy.
It does. I heard your conversation. I thought it was a great one. I understand where they're both coming from. I think we overestimate how much so much of that stuff matters or doesn't matter. I think these are two, especially with Trump, extremely known entities. You know exactly how you feel about Trump. Whatever he said in the last 10 days doesn't change how you feel about him for the last basically 10 years, for the most part. Kamala Harris is an unknown entity who has doubled down on an unwillingness to be open, truthful, candid about her policy positions. Whether she's flipped or not, no comment. I mean, she's just saying, "I'm not him." And I watched a barn burner of a football game, 1-6 Saints and the 2-6 Panthers yesterday with my wife. But I realized it was the North Carolina. All the ads were presidential ads because it was a North Carolina game where voters would be watching. Otherwise, we don't really get a whole lot of those ads in Tennessee. And Kamala's making,
Really?
there were some 2-minute ads in there, which are really long, really smooth, really carefully curated. They don't say anything. They look really good. I don't know that a lot of what's happened in the last 10 days or that jobs report really matters. It is an F on the most important subject on their report card. She's a part of that administration. I think it's going to depend. I don't know. The answer is I don't know, Will. The answer is like everybody else.
I don't know either.
I'm up and down on a roller coaster. One piece of data's got me happy. Another piece of data's got me sad. One analyst says the turnout's great. Another one says it's terrible. I don't know. It's a gut. It feels like a cop-out, but it does feel like a gut check, white knuckle. What I'm going to pay attention to on election night is what ballots are being reported in what states based on, is it early votes? Is it day of? And what were the percentage of those? And maybe you can get a sense.
Well, speaking of that, by the way, so tomorrow, jump on to YouTube or Facebook, Will Cain Show live from 10 a.m. to noon from the sweet spot in North Carolina, Concord, North Carolina. Pete will be in a swing state as well. So will Rachel Campos Duffy. And I believe so will Lawrence Jones. At least 3 of us will be on the road doing diners during Fox and Friends. Then you tune on to the Will Cain Show over on Digital Network. And then at night, head over to Fox Nation where Pete's hosting an election special. I'll be on it. Many, many other people will that night. And you can watch. You can also keep Brett Baer and Martha McCallum and Bill Hemmer up on Fox. And then you can that's a hangout session. They'll give you the info over there on Fox Nation. It's a hangout analysis, breakdown what's happening with Hegseth. I'm just going to give you an example, Pete, what you're talking about. This is Kamala, I think it was yesterday, talking about having cast her vote. And then they asked her about, which way did you vote? Watch this.
Have you returned the ballot to California, and how did you vote on Prop 36?
So my ballot is on its way to California, and I'm going to trust the system that it will arrive there. And I am not going to talk about the vote on that because, honestly, it's the Sunday before the election, and I don't intend to create an endorsement one way or another around it.
Pretty wild. Okay, I'm not going to tell you it's Prop 36 is a proposition in California. No, sorry, can't tell you. I wonder why she wouldn't tell, by the way. It's like just remain a blank slate. Was it really going to be that controversial?
One of the most absurd things I've ever heard. I'm not going to put my finger on the scale because there's an election. We got to let the election play out. Too much information is bad for voters. We just got to let the election happen.
You
and
are
after
the
that,
scale.
We'll figure out how we feel about Prop 36. Right?
Right.
Ask it so we can find out what's in it. Just clearly, it's me, guys. And then, isn't it about criminal justice reform, basically, which is something she's been totally back and forth on. I don't know the exact contours of Prop 36, but it's about decriminalization, and you could see how she'd want to be on both sides of that issue, considering where the base is, considering what her background is.
By the way, I didn't watch Saints Panthers, and that's a real act of love in a marriage that you watched that game.
I did.
It's terrible football teams, but I watched Cowboys Falcons, Jags Eagles, and Packers. Who was it? Packers got smoked
Packers
by
Lions.
who? Why am I forgetting? Lions. And I also watched Vikings Colts. My point is, I saw political ads on all games, man. And I mean, I don't know, but I live in Texas. So, YouTube is probably, I don't know how much of those ads are the national ad that everyone's getting on the broadcast network, how much of them are through the YouTube stream that recognizes that I am in Texas. And, those ads are everywhere. I would imagine everybody listening and watching last night that watched football is inundated with political ads.
I would think so. And I don't know. These guys get paid a lot of money to put together really, really good messages that, and you try to look at it objectively. And if you are just in for good vibes and a change in vibes, but you don't like the Biden vibes, but you don't like the Trump vibes, so she's just a different vibe kind of from him. You like what you see in those commercials. Again, I just don't know that this is where I think that the Harris campaign has a disadvantage. They've relied on a massive money advantage to run a lot of ads at the end. 2 to 3 times more than Trump can run. I just think the days of that having a big impact on who you're voting for, there's diminishing return on that, considering where people can get their information from. Unless they're so dissatisfied with Trump at the end, they go, well, she looks okay. And they cast their vote.
Over here on YouTube, I am says, that's their handle, I am undecided voter, and both sides sound crazy. Laughing, crying face emoji. Like neither side is about unity. And then Jennifer Waite says on YouTube, women are turning out in big numbers for both. It's ignorant to assume most women are one-issue voters, especially those who want to feed their kids. You know what people are talking about? Here's another one. I live in Dallas, and I live in an urbanish area of Dallas. You know that. I have been a little surprised by the number, and it's a conservative area. And most people I know are conservative. That's the truth in Dallas. But just kind of like taking walks in the neighborhood, I'm a little taken aback by the number of Harris Waltz signs. I am. And I don't think Texas is going to go blue. That's not what I'm talking about. Just like I don't think Iowa's going to go blue. That one poll out there is suggesting that it is. It's more like, ooh, is there something indicative here going on across the nation? And I only saw 2 of them, Pete, but I saw, I'm a Republican, but I'm not insane. I'm voting Harris Waltz. And there's another version of that sign that I've seen, Yeah, but that's the one I'm most focused on, because the question on this women thing is, are there Republican women? I mean, I guess it's not just about women, but are there Republican women voting for Harris Waltz?
I'm sure there are. I don't know many of them. I think I'd probably find the same thing if I was in nicer neighborhoods of Nashville. I mean, there's no Harris Waltz signs. Just like if you went out to rural Texas, you're not finding Harris Waltz signs. There's not any around in our neighborhood. But
you don't live in a neighborhood. You can quit acting like you live in a neighborhood. It takes 2 miles to walk to the nearest house from your house, and so you're not going to see any signs.
Not seeing any signs. They're actually, all I see is local signs and Trump signs. I think the Trump folks, they've made a bet, right? They made a bet that they're going to get men out in a way that is as big or larger than Democrats will get women out, and that the women vote is exaggerated on how much it will cut for Kamala, because there are women that care about a lot of other things. That's what Jason Chaffetz made the case for. I think there are women on the Republican side who are probably sick of Trump, and they'll most likely sit it out. But I think there are plenty of people on the other side who also look at their lives and they say, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a little disaffected, but I'd like the economy to work for me. I mean, we've seen people go in that direction too. I don't want to sound like a both sides are on this. I don't know.
No, I know how you feel. We all feel this way. I mean, it's not even day to day, Pete. It's like, I'd say 15 minutes to 15-minute increments. Like I'll scroll and I see the Siena poll. Oh, no, that doesn't look good for Trump. Then I see the Atlas poll. Oh, that looks really good for Trump. I see the early returns in Pennsylvania, and that looks really bad for Democrats. And then I see that 55% of the early returns are women. And I'm going, what does that mean? You know, I don't have any idea at this point where we are in the game. I don't know the score.
Are there secret Trump voters that we're still not finding in the polls, or have the polls accounted for that now? And they really can't find the Kamala voters. Like, are we cannibalizing the early vote or not? I mean, I think the bigger takeaway from this in many ways is we're just in a giant political washing machine right now. And Donald Trump has reshuffled everything. Pray to God he wins. And if he does, that's one scenario. If he doesn't, that's another. Either way, there will be an era after Trump. And I don't think it is automatic that era after Trump goes straight to J.D. Vance or goes straight to a MAGA. I think we're about to enter a real dangerous and interesting churn, especially on the Republican side. It could be 4 years from now, or it could be 4 days from now, where everything flips on its head. And I think our inability to get a sense and wrap our arms around this election is a sense of that. Like there's these constituents. It's not entirely true, because you've got Black and Hispanic voters coming over to the Republican Party, but are they coming to the Republican Party, or are they going to Trump? And that we don't know yet either. So there's just a lot of things that are unknowable. And I just pray that we have some clarity. Obviously the clarity is to the Trump side is what I want, that we can count votes. And I was optimistic. You remember, 2 weeks ago, I was pretty optimistic. Hey, there's this hidden Trump vote, and it's going to be a bigger night than people think. I think it could be a 52-48 night for Trump, though. I really do. And if that's the case, because the polling isn't accurate, because they did mobilize for early voting, then we could get earlier calls than we think. But who knows? We'll probably be still talking about it Saturday on the show without a result.
We might be calling the presidential election on Saturday on Fox and Friends Weekend. All right, Pete Hegseth.
We look at each other.
Again, Fox Nation.
We call it all together in unison.
Pete, be a grown-up. We're not calling it. Even if we're hosting a show, we're not calling it. I mean, I love the continuous delusion of the three of us on Fox and Friends. It always errs towards optimism until we're punched in the face once again. And you've been there the longest. It's going to get like, hey, guys, we're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, Bill Hemmer's going to come back and call the election. It sure as hell isn't going to be, Rachel announcing the next president of the United States.
Rachel comes up and goes, we have a Fox News alert. Maybe. You never know.
Maybe. We'll see if we're hosting on Saturday. You never know. Never know. All right. Pete Hegseth, he will be hosting tomorrow night on Fox Nation, an election special.
Yeah, we'll see you there. It'll be fun.
That's where you want to be. Yeah, you want to be online tomorrow. You want to be with Will Cain Show 10 to noon, and then you want to be when it all kicks off at what time tomorrow on Fox Nation?
7 p.m. Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. Check us out. We're at Kid Rock's Honky Tonk in downtown Nashville. We got a whole slate of awesome guests all night long. Kid Rock's going to show up, say hello. You never know what'll happen there. And we're going to take in the returns and watch the numbers and have a little party. Hopefully it's a happy ending to the party. We'll see.
On Fox Nation. All right, man. I'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
There you go. That is, by the way, the world-renowned author of The War on Warriors, among many other bestsellers. And my co-host on Fox and Friends Weekend, Pete Hegseth. Okay, so we've heard, I think, a pretty fair and balanced. We've had a fairly fair and balanced day in trying to understand optimism when it came from Jason Chaffetz and pessimism when it came from Trey Gowdy. Reading the tea leaves when it comes to Donald Trump from Pete Hegseth. Let's go to the other side of the aisle, and let's check in on the feelings, the pros and the cons. Do they feel confident on the side of Kamala Harris? Jessica Tarlov of The Five, next on The Will Cain Show. Here on The Will Cain Show from the Willisha. Let's get into that. Will Cain Show streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. We're Monday through Thursday, 12 o'clock Eastern time. That's where you can hang out with us all year around. But this week, special editions of The Will Cain Show. Tomorrow, we kick off at 10 a.m. We'll go up until noon, 2 hours. We have a ton of guests. We have Bill Hemmer, Brett Baer, not just tomorrow, but I'm talking about throughout the week. We have Laura Ingraham. We have Dave Portnoy of Barstool. We have a ton of guests. You don't want to miss any episodes this week of The Will Cain Show. Over there within the militia on YouTube, folks are talking. You're talking. This is what you have to say. Tad says, Pete nailed it. The media is assuming all women will break for Kamala, but we know they won't. Men need to get out like they never have before. And then Joey Jabroni says, reproductive rights aren't on the ballot. Educate yourself. What are you voting on? Please. It's true. It's not on the ballot. But there were some shocking revelations here on the show. Shocking. I don't know which of you in New York are comfortable sharing this. I know that two-a-days is. What did you just tell me during the commercial break? Two-a-days.
My mom has been conservative, as a Republican. She voted for Trump in the last election, and she has changed her mind in this one. And so she went the other way.
Why?
I just think...
Voted for Trump in the past.
Yeah, because of him. She just doesn't think he's the right person for office in the way he's acted and the things that, with the convictions and stuff. She just doesn't like him, the man, as she says.
Yeah.
So
not the politician. She
voted for Trump over Biden, Trump over Clinton, but she'll vote Harris over Trump?
Yeah, I just think it's fatigue on Trump, honestly, in talking to her. I think it's just fatigue for her. It was really
shocking.
Yeah.
And James, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, but you had a somewhat a similar story?
No, I know my mom would come on and say the exact same thing and say it proudly. Voted every Republican since Ronald Reagan. And, I mean, my sister's still going to go Trump. But it's the same exact issue as Dan. And it'll be the rest of the ballot will be R in hopes of moderating Harris's further left impulses. But it's the man.
That is, I'm genuinely shocked. I'm genuinely shocked at that. I mean, I can't believe 2 times in, but not for a third. And that it would be. Does it have anything to do with Kamala Harris, or is it all simply a referendum on Donald Trump?
Just Donald Trump. Doesn't even really like
Nothing
Kamala
Harris.
Yeah. Honestly, nothing good or bad to say.
Incredible. Well, I couldn't think of a better way to tee up my next guest. She is the co-host of The Five. I couldn't think of a better way to tee it up for her. She'll be pleased. She doesn't get that kind of runway laid out for her on Fox very often. No. It's like somebody just went up, put the golf ball on the tee for you, Jessica, and now you get to pull out your driver.
Pitch perfect.
Jessica Tarlov.
The best day to be on the Will Cain Show. I did not know about this Willisha, though. I'm not a violent person, so that feels a little aggressive for me, but that's pretty cool.
It is. It's intended to be aggressive.
Like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. You heard what 2 of my guys had to say there.
Yeah.
And you and I are going to do this, and we're going to talk about the tea leaves and try to read into a little bit of how do you feel about this. And look, Jessica, I trust that you wouldn't do this. I really do. But here's what I'm not interested today in. I'm not that interested in people trying to speak things into existence. You know what I mean? Like guising what you want to happen in terms of analytics. And I don't think you'll do that. But I think what I really would like to hear from you today is like where you feel confident and where you feel insecure, knowing that, you are pulling for Kamala Harris. But just to start off what you just heard from my guys, like that's the kind of big question, or it's at least one of the big questions. How many Republican women will vote? And I can't even believe I'm saying this, but vote for Kamala Harris.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, and they summed it up perfectly, that you should actually say how many Republican women will vote against Trump. Very little about this. I think it's pro Kamala Harris. I do think that the Dobbs decision is a major piece of this, and I do want to talk about that. One of them, Joey Jabroni, I think you were calling him, was saying that abortion rights are not on the ballot. They are on the ballot, and that is how a majority of women feel about it. But this has, and it's every election since Donald Trump came down that golden escalator, it's about Donald Trump on both sides of that ballot, the pro and the con.
But wait,
and
I agree with that. And you and I've talked about that. Every election since he came down the escalator has been a referendum, pro or con, on Donald Trump. But you saying abortion's on the ballot. It's not. You're saying women feel like it is? Like it's just
in 10 states. Well, it's literally on the ballot in 10 states, which is a major
but not federal
factor.
Elections.
No, but you have to understand, and I think that this was a key component of that wild result in Iowa, the Ann Selzer poll. that had Kamala up 3. And I'm a realistic person. I think Donald Trump is going to win Iowa. So she has Kamala up 3, and she's a hugely respected pollster. Most people would say actually the best one in the country, certainly the best in Iowa. Let's say Trump wins by 5, which I think is feasible if she has Kamala up 3 and Emerson has Trump up 10. So the biggest constituency that was going for Kamala Harris is senior women. So they were favoring Kamala 2-1. And this is a Republican state, very conservative, has a big pro-choice streak to it. But a number of these women consider themselves to be pro-life. But they were voting for Kamala because they felt that they grew up and went through their pregnancy years or their family making years, reproductive years. Sorry, that was a silly way of saying it. More free than their daughters and granddaughters will. And there's something that is little discussed, but I think is really important here. And this is the difference between the way I think these women grew up thinking about abortion versus what now is deemed abortion, i.e. what happens when people have a miscarriage and can't get the kind of care that they need. And there was a letter signed by a bunch of OBGYNs in Texas that came out over the weekend because there were 2 other women who passed away from treatable conditions as a result of a miscarriage. And they're basically saying, we're not able to do our jobs. We're not being able to fulfill our Hippocratic oath. And you can't overlook the fact that over the summer, a very restrictive abortion ban came into effect in Iowa. And what Ann Selzer, the pollster, was saying, she did a bunch of interviews yesterday, was that she has seen a sea change just since that abortion ban came into effect in Iowa. And that's what I mean when I say that it's on the ballot, that women in particular, though there are a lot of men that feel this way as well, want to use this election as a way to stand up and say, picking it back to the states does not mean that we are going to have decent outcomes for women that are finding themselves pregnant for a whole host of reasons.
So I live in Texas, so I've seen some of these ads that are running. And by the way, they're incredibly confusing ads, like on the substance of understanding exactly what happened. And you and I don't need to litigate the facts of any of those particular cases, because what we're talking about at this point is well beyond the should and shouldn't. We're just describing what is and isn't. And what I mean by that is, are these ads, honest or not, affecting the way people choose to vote, either already or tomorrow? And I can't disagree with you yet. We'll find out in 36 hours. And I do wonder about the long-term effect of this on Republican politics probably over the next decade at least. So doing away with Dobbs, first of all, and this will be a throwaway comment, but it's right, was absolutely correct constitutionally on the merits when it comes to the law. Returning it to the democratic process also took it out of the Fed hands. So where you think, okay, well, this doesn't have to impact our, presidential elections, for example. But now each state is doing their thing. And if what you're saying is true, that as a state makes a law that is either popular or unpopular with its constituents, how they feel about that law bleeds up. We always think about stuff bleeding down, but bleeds up. So if Iowa has a restrictive abortion law, women are upset, they penalize Donald Trump for making it a democratic process. And on and on and on and on, whatever state it may be. And I can't tell you you're wrong on that. And that may play a role, not just in this election, but honestly, like I said, for a decade. It shouldn't, I don't think, because I think we should all embrace democracy and separate Fed from state. But I can't say it isn't impacting this election.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is, for people who just believe in the morality of this, they look at abortion as it's a person from the moment of conception, and this was a huge moral victory. I think that they understand that you could lose a lot of elections, but they don't care because it's such a bigger purpose to all of this. And frankly, I mean, it's not the same comp because it doesn't affect as many people this way. But after October 7th, and when the college campus protests were starting and the Dems were really trying to figure out what to do, and frankly had an inadequate response as far as I'm concerned, as a Jew and just as supporter of Israel, as an American, I said, you know what? Why don't we treat this like pro-lifers treat abortion and just say there is no moral relativism about this at this particular moment? I just want to hear, bring the hostages home. And we can talk about, I'm for a two-state solution. I think Bibi Netanyahu isn't a great leader.
And what you're saying, the comp you're making is, even if it hurts you electorally in Michigan, who cares?
Take
Be
the
on
loss.
the right side.
Right. History will be kinder to you because you stood up for the Jews after what happened on October 7th. And there are a lot of pro-lifers who feel that way. Like, for instance, Greg Gutfeld, he doesn't think this is a negotiable. He was like, if you are for life, then you take whatever electoral effects this might have. Now, that's a very difficult pill to swallow for a lot of people who are very enmeshed in the process and know that you're going to take an electoral hit that maybe you could try to jimmy a little bit. No Jimmy Fallon reference, but you know what I mean? Try to work around a little bit to be more compromising. Why a lot of people wanted a 15-week ban. Kellyanne Conway has spoken about that. She is vehemently pro-life, but knows what would be a political winner for Republicans versus just allowing Iowa to have a ban like that, what goes on in Florida, what goes on in Texas. So I can see the moral case for it. But I do think that the only way to accomplish things, unfortunately, is often to make some sort of compromise to have electoral power, because that's how most of our country operates.
I want to move on from abortion a second, because you can often hear the ratings going down when you talk about abortion.
I'm sorry. I was going to kill your
out.
ratings anyway. They expected I would show up ready to talk about abortion.
That's true. That's true. Hell with it. We're already at the bottom of the barrel. So let's just do it. No. Jessica, who I always respect coming on in hostile environments. I said that isn't, Trey Gowdy was on earlier and he said, Donald Trump missed a chance during the debate. And I think he's right. Like, Donald Trump's position on abortion is like down the fairway of America. It's like, this is the most popular position you could hold. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Kamala's, if required to be articulated, would be much more radical. But he didn't require her. And Republicans have yet never required Democrats. In a single instance, can I think of, articulate your full position on abortion, and you don't just get to say, women's right to choose. Like, we got to flesh it out beyond that. And no one's ever pushed her or anyone else to do that. Instead, what's happening, and you're right, is like because I don't know every single law being pushed in every state. The issue is getting to be framed by name your legislator in Alabama. You know what I mean? It's getting to be framed by name your legislator in Iowa. And it should be
Texas.
Required.
Yeah.
No, you, Kamala, you should be telling us what you think. Okay, so I think what we just discussed is
the Roe standard. But anyway, I agree with you. And I think, honestly, if Republicans were smart, they would have put a bill on the floor. I'm going to pick now 20 weeks is basically the viability point. If they put a bill on the floor that said there's a 20-week national ban and exceptions for life of the mother or whatever you need. And then liberal states can do whatever they want, right? Like, New York can still pass the most permissive law if they want. And I think having to hold Democrats' feet to the fire about that would have reaped a lot more positive energy towards the Republican case.
Okay. So what do you feel most insecure about, Jessica? Like, as you look at it and like, okay, you brought up Iowa, you brought up Emerson. I've seen, I talked about this with Jason Chaffetz, who's a very big optimist today. Early returns look good for Republicans in Georgia and even in Pennsylvania, where I think the numbers, Jessica, was in 2020 could be an outlier. We should be comparing this perhaps to 2016. But but 2020, you had like 1.2 million, was it? 1 million, 1.2 million buffer lead going into Election Day from early returns. And then it's down to like 600,000. I'm in the ballpark, I think. And so that's bad. Even though you're up by 600,000 registered voters in Pennsylvania, that's bad as compared to 2020. Where are you most insecure?
Well, I think anyone who's being honest is just going to be insecure about Pennsylvania, because that's the keys to the kingdom, right? Like, no matter what route you're taking to winning this thing, all roads go through Pennsylvania. I happen to think Tim Walz was the right pick for Kamala, but if we do lose, there's obviously going to be a lot of Josh Shapiro discussion afterwards, even though the guy didn't want the job, and you can't really force someone to do a job they don't want to do. So nervous about Pennsylvania, but also I think we're saying now that we're nauseously optimistic because of the ground game. And I think that is somewhere where Democrats have just been lapping Republicans. I have not heard anything about their canvassing operation, door knocking, phone banking. My mom is in Scranton right now knocking on doors, and she said it's a sea of blue out there. And that is how elections are won. When you're targeting now 3% that might be undecided, right, or unsure if they're going to vote, having someone turn up at your door can make the difference in those conversations. It doesn't feel like Republicans are doing that. My main nerd point. Go ahead. No, I'll remember.
No, please. Your main point. I want to hear your main point of what? Insecurity?
Of insecurity is about men 45 and under. So, this pool of male support that Trump needs to turn out are low propensity voters, typically speaking. So I would always prefer to have to turn out women who are high propensity voters, even if it is a conversion from typically voting for a right-leaning candidate to voting for Kamala. If the Joe Rogan audience turns out, that will A, make Trump president, but B, say something so fundamental about how broken the Democratic Party is and how bad the brand is and how awful we have been in targeting and talking to a group that actually has positions that are more aligned with our party. And that's kind of the genius of Trump, right? He has softened the Republican Party. Yes. Well, just the way that he talks about issues anywhere from abortion to child care, like he makes it seem as if he's actually fluid on everything versus like, I don't know, if Paul Ryan sat down and he's like, no, this is what I think about that. Like Trump's always willing to say whatever, and it works for him with a certain demo. But if we lose that group by astronomical margins, like something we've never seen before, I think that...
Real quick, what group? Young men or men at large?
Young men.
Which is the group?
Young men.
Okay.
I think that is going to cause, when you do those autopsies after the election, it's going to be a massive job that we're going to have to do to rebuild. I'm not as concerned about minority voters. I think that reverts to the mean, but young men, especially young white men, is really a focus for me.
I think you're right. By the way, I think that, and Pete Hegseth brought this a little bit earlier, to the extent that Donald Trump has made gains with black voters or black men or Latinos, it's not entirely clear that would be there for a J.D. Vance or a Glenn Youngkin. That's an effect of Donald Trump. But the young men shift could be for the next half century. Maybe. Could have an effect. So that you might have just answered my last question to you. Tomorrow's news today. I think that we've talked about it. I think it's clear. If Donald Trump loses, it will be, when we all sit down and we explain why, it will be most likely about this women thing. And when I say that, I mean, I'm not trying to make it all about abortion, but it'll be about the women vote. Because I think it's actually bigger than abortion, will be my guess. It'll also be about how they feel about his personality and so forth. But if Kamala Harris loses, what will be the explanation Wednesday? Will it be about what you just laid out for us, the issue with young men?
It will be that, and it will also be why did Joe Biden not step aside a year ago and let us have a primary? And I don't even know. Right. I assume that Trump's hold on the Republican Party would have been strong enough to go through a primary anyway, but I'm pretty sure there would be a lot of strategic voters out there who, if they saw that Gretchen Whitmer was going to be the candidate, or Josh Shapiro or Wes Moore or Gavin Newsom, that they might have voted differently in the primary because they would have thought that Ron DeSantis would stack up better, or there would have been a draft Marco Rubio. I think Kim Reynolds is fantastic. Like, there might have been a more diverse conversation on the Republican side. So I think Joe Biden will have a lot of people coming after him hard for hanging on too long to power that way. But I don't.
Yesterday he was George Washington saving democracy. Tomorrow he could be the downfall.
Well, everyone needs someone to blame. And we have, for Kamala's team, which is Biden's team, and the way that they changed the way they campaign is unbelievable in such a short amount of time. But they have run a great campaign. I would think you could even admit that for a flawed candidate and a shortened cycle like this, the fact that we went from down probably 7-8 points, which is massive for a Republican to have that kind of lead. And that's what we would have been heading towards if the fallout from the debate had continued. And now we're tied to a slight advantage with a candidate that kind of woke up one day and suddenly became the head of the party. It's pretty spectacular.
I think if Kamala Harris loses and one of the explanations is that I just simply didn't understand who she is, then I would say not a great campaign. I don't think that probably will be one of the explanations. She did. I agree with you. They ran a good campaign in keeping us from ever making this anything but a referendum on Donald Trump. If she loses, then we're going to look back on it and say, you should have made it a little more about you and let us get to know you. I've got to leave it here today, but I want to share with you.
He won't allow that.
Go.
Yeah.
Who won't allow what?
Trump never allows it to be about anything but himself. He can't get out of his own way, which is the benefit for Democrats if this streak continues of us being able to beat him. But he never takes a win, ever.
I'm not good at directing my show, but I want to go out on a high note here with you. Liz Davis over on YouTube says, I would have loved to see a woman president, but not Harris. She is not who she is. God help us if she wins. Redo Mega 24 says, your city just executed a squirrel. I think that's to you talking about New York City.
I'm pro squirrel.
Chris Long says, I like Jessica. She's one of the only debatable Democrats. So see, the ratings didn't bottom out, Jessica. There you go.
Well, you have 3 viewers.
Yeah, we got at least 3 viewers, and one of them at least likes Jessica Tarlov. Jessica, I love having you on the show. Thank you for doing this with me today.
Thank you, and we'll be watching your coverage.
Okay, thanks, Jessica Tarlov. We're watching the 5 as well. So now, finally, as we go out today on the Will Cain Show, let's get one last good, deep look inside the numbers with pollster Lee Carter next on the Will Cain Show. A referendum on Donald Trump. Here's an example of why I was suggesting to Jessica Tarlov, if Kamala Harris loses, it will be about more than Donald Trump. It will be about whether or not she remained too much of a mystery, and that was a flaw in her campaign. Daniel Gander says on YouTube, she should have went on Rogan, would have done wonders for her campaign. That would have been something that helped to understand Kamala Harris. But right now, she may win, remaining a mystery. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. live, right here on Facebook, on YouTube, at foxnews.com. 2-hour show. Dave Portnoy. Who else is on the show tomorrow, guys? Two-a-days, Young Establishment James. I've got so many guests this week from Himmer and Bayer and Kilmeade that I don't remember who is which day. Who is going to be on this 2-hour extravaganza tomorrow, fellas?
All righty. 10 a.m., we're leading off with John Ashbrook. 10:15, Buck Sexton. 10:30, Jimmy Fela. 10:45, Brooke Singman. 11, Clay Travis. Dave Portnoy comes in at 11:20, and Josh Kraushaar tops it out at 11:40.
There we go.
Heck yeah.
That's good. Big show. Clay and Buck joining us as well. Make sure. So the point is, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify on Election Day. They'll be live from the Sweet Spot in Concord, North Carolina. That's a big edition of the Will Cain Show. Over on YouTube, Oliver McSweeney says, what's with all the hate to Jessica? She literally said nothing incorrect. There's also accusations, I believe, two-a-days that I'm censoring the chat. Certainly not.
Well, technically it would be me because I'm sending these to you. So
2 days is the deep state.
And what are you doing? You're highlighting positive comments here on the Will Cain Show
and
about
negative.
Jessica, and not
there's negative,
not the waterfall of negativities, Jessica.
Well, there's a lot of people in the chat that are just saying negative things, but we move on.
Well, I do a lot during the show in terms of I operate this wall, I operate the camera. Wait, is this fair? I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. there's no other host doing shows right now that are doing as many other jobs while they're hosting the show as me.
Just
right?
you.
Like I'm doing some directing. I'm doing some graphics work. I'm doing some things.
And this is not kiss buttery, but you are doing a lot. You are.
You're having fun.
And
I think
I'm like
you'd like using
I'm like
the
a
camera.
DJ.
Yeah.
I'm like a DJ. Okay?
And Mar-a-Lago.
All these little buttons I'm operating.
He picks.
But I'm not. I'm not moderating comments. That's one thing. Yet, by the way, I'd love to start. That's actually not even a technological thing. That's a little more of are they going to let me thing. Like, I just want your comments right here, free flowing, running on the screen. That's what I want. And I'm fighting for you, Alicia. I'm fighting for you. The question is, am I going to be able to get the suits and the bureaucracy to let me put you directly on air and not having to go against the censor that is 2-a-day? That's what I want. So but I just want you to know I'm on your side. I'm fighting the man. All right. Where are we headed here for Tuesday? Swimming in numbers. I'm swimming in polls. So I saw her just a few days ago, maybe a week ago, Madison Square Garden. She's president of Maslansky Partners. She's a language strategist and researcher and author of Persuasion, Convincing Others When Facts Don't Seem to Matter. Lee Carter knows something about reading the tea leaves. Hey, Lee.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm really good. I've had an interesting show today with a varying degree of perspectives. Jason Chaffetz, an optimist about what's going to happen tomorrow. Trey Gowdy, a bit of a pessimist about what's going to happen tomorrow. Pete Hegseth laying out the case for Donald Trump. Jessica Tarlov laying out the case for Kamala Harris. I've got polls coming at me, Lee, from every angle, making me feel like I'm in a washing machine that every 15 minutes I don't know who's going to win the presidency. What are you seeing right now? What do you think is going to happen tomorrow?
I'm feeling the same way as you are. I felt very, very strongly about 4 or 5 days ago that it was Donald Trump's victory coming, and there was no doubt in my mind about it. But looking at some of the trends and some of the latest polls that are coming out, specifically around that blue wall, I know Jesse was just talking about Pennsylvania, there's a little bit of concern there. So when you look at it, I think that ultimately, it still feels like this is going to break for Trump, but I'm very, very cautious about that. I think if you are in one of these swing states, you better get out there and vote because every single vote is going to count. This is just crazy. But there are some early turnout numbers that I'm looking at that are giving me the case for Donald Trump winning. The first is that the urban turnout seems to be down. The second is we're not seeing the female turnout as we had expected it to be. And I think that's a big sign for Kamala Harris not performing as well as we expected. And we're seeing rural turnout to be up so far.
Okay, so there's 3 points you just made. I actually have questions about each of those, but the most notable one was what you just said about women. So I feel like I've been hearing the opposite, Lee. They're like, oh, women are really turning out. If they're 55% of the electorate, that's good. Mark Halpern's like, if women, he said it comes down to that. If women are 55% of the electorate, then it's going to be a victory for Kamala Harris. But you're telling me you're seeing something right now suggesting not a big turnout of women.
Seeing it to be less than in early voting right now than it was in 2020. So we're seeing trends away from some of our key demographics. I know we're looking at a very different early voting scenario because we have more in-person voting and all the different kinds of things. We're not in the middle of COVID. But just some of those indicators are suggesting to me that women aren't quite turning out the way that it was expected.
Okay.
I look at that and it's, again, this is like reading tea leaves because we don't know exactly. Comparing the early voting from 2020, we're in the middle of the pandemic versus now is a little bit difficult to do. But when you're still looking at it in this way, knowing that the keys to the kingdom lie for her among women and the keys to the kingdom with him lie among men, especially young men, that's what I'm looking at.
Well, what can you tell me about, I agree with you, 2020 could be leading us all in some odd directions. Well, how does it compare to 16? Do you have anything that you could tell me about that, like with women? And that's kind of interesting. Hillary Clinton is a unique character, but it was Donald Trump versus a woman, so that's comparable a little bit to Kamala. And, of course, it was pre-COVID. How does it look? I see the Real Clear polling averages, and it's better for Donald Trump than it was in 16, a race that he ended up winning. And it looks even better than that. What are you seeing? Let's not compare 2020. Do you have anything on 16?
Yeah, 2016 in comparison to where we are today, Donald Trump's doing much better than he did in 2016, whether you're looking at the general election or you're looking at the swing states. And it's across the board right now. Donald Trump I think Hillary Clinton was about 3.2 ahead on the day before the election. Donald Trump is now 0.1 ahead on the averages. When you look at each of the swing states, Hillary Clinton had a clear advantage, and Donald Trump ended up taking them. So right now, Donald Trump is ahead in all but Michigan and Wisconsin when you look at the averages. And ultimately, I think that's a good sign for him.
What you mentioned late breaking. Gowdy earlier in the Will Cain Show brought up late breaking. Tell me what that means, by the way. So is this people responding to polls just in the last week who haven't yet voted, or are you talking about what we see at the closing stages of early voting? Like, what does it mean late breaking voters are breaking in? Okay, so if you say late breaking votes are going the way of Kamala Harris, that means what? So, yeah, tell me what that means.
Okay, so there is a fair amount being written right now about the late breaking votes and saying that they're breaking for Kamala. So that is based on polling where they talk to people who have made their decision in the last 7 days or last 14 days. Which way did you break? A lot of people are saying the last week or two they broke for Kamala Harris. When I'm talking about looking at some of the numbers I shouldn't have been using the same thing. I was looking at the sort of the numbers that are coming out of early voting, which is a little bit different than those polls. But the anecdotes right now from the polls are saying that people who have decided more recently decided on Kamala. People who had their mind made up long in advance, it's favoring Trump.
So what is that in the last week? Is that what I mean? Is that Madison Square Garden? Is that a joke from Tony Hinchcliffe? What is that? Like, or is it just finally making up your mind? I've got to now, so I'm finally making up my mind.
I think it has less to do with Madison Square Garden and Tony Hinchman as much as it does to do. There was a lot of reckoning that people had to do with themselves about what is ultimately going to be more important to me. At the end of the day, I've talked to voters and undecided voters for a long time. A lot of them say, I really don't like either of the candidates. I've got to do what's best for my family. And for my family, that means I'm going to vote for Donald Trump because of the economy, or I've got to do that's what's best for women. And what's best for women is Kamala Harris. I think that she did have some pull with women. But I'm going to say, and I'm still not sure that this is true, because that MSG event, I think we're going to see, and we're not going to know until tomorrow, because turnout tomorrow is going to be a different thing. I think we're going to see turnout among Republicans become huge, because what's happened over the last week is like a microcosm of what's happened with Donald Trump voters for the last 9 years, which is been judged, they've been shamed, they've been called Nazis, they've been called fascists, they've been called all sorts of things. And that is not what they're responding to. When you were in the room at MSG, it wasn't like it was a bunch of people calling people names. What people were holding on to was the idea that Donald Trump was pointing to, that we're going to make America dream big again. It was an optimistic, excited group of people who are not clinging to the negative comments. They were almost rolling their eyes at those comments or laughing at those comments, but holding on to the promise of something bigger. And I think that Trump supporters are so tired and frustrated by being called dumb, Nazis, fascists, you name what the name calling has been, and that energizes them every time. They might be like, I've had enough of it, but I'm so tired of you looking down on me and my people that I'm going to go out and I'm going to vote anyway. And I think ultimately the MSG thing is going to backfire. The garbage comment is going to be galvanizing. And I think really when we're going to look at the whole thing, we're going to see something flip what a lot of people are saying.
I think you just wrote my presidential campaign theme. When you just said that, I was like, that is such a great, making the American dream big again. I feel like we spend so much time on little bullshit. Like we spend so much time on, and also negative, pessimistic fight about, like, yeah, doesn't everybody just want, like, I want a big American dream, a big one. Again, like, we're going to be the best at everything. Elon Musk is going to be putting men on Mars, We're all going to be starting businesses and innovating the next economy. Like, big success. Maybe some failures along the way, too. But we're going to go for it because that's who we are. I don't know. That's just much better than all the pessimism.
There's
We
two
Go
different
ahead.
voters that I talked to during this election that really just changed my mind about how they view this. One was I was talking to somebody who isn't doing that well right now. And I said, well, you would think in some ways, because of that, you would more likely vote for Kamala because of social programs and that kind of thing. And he said, absolutely not. The reason I'm not voting for Kamala is because she thinks this is all I can do. Trump believes I can do
Right.
better. And that big
Right.
dream again, that's big, right? That's what we're after. People want us to believe in us again. Trump is really the champion of the forgotten man and woman. And I think that's something that isn't understood. It's misrepresented all the time. This isn't a group of people who are white supremacists. This isn't a group of people who are anything but hopeful that things can be awesome again. And that's it.
Yeah. Right. I don't know, Lee. I love it. Okay, really quickly, because you mentioned two other points, and I want to follow up on them. You said something about the urban vote also not showing up. Turnout. And by the way, urban is a euphemism, so I'm going to say it the way it's black vote. Maybe to some extent we could call it the Latino vote as well. So black voters, and by the way, it is a euphemism, right, Lee? Does it include Latino voters? When people say urban vote, is it pretty much a proxy for black vote, or does it include both demographics?
It includes both. Yeah.
Okay, so turnout's depressed?
Vote. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah, right. It doesn't mean, though, by the way, the yuppies living in Uptown, right? That's not what it usually means. So I'm getting directly to the point. And you're saying the turnout's lower for those two groups right now is what you're seeing?
Expected. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, and people have suggested that, well, like, people were saying Donald Trump had actually made gains with those two groups, which would suggest you kind of want some turnout. Now, I don't know. Then there are those saying that the Tony Hinchcliffe joke hurts him with Latino voters. I don't know. But actually, I would think that in the end, it probably cuts against Kamala. If that is not a big turnout of those minority votes, that is got to be bad news for Kamala.
Yeah, but I've also talked to some Latino voters since that joke. And it's not, some of this has been priced into what Donald Trump is, right? I talked to one in particular who was talking about, it's like he's crass. He wasn't even the one that said it. It was a mistake. But at the end of the day, I want opportunities for people to come into this country legally and not with their hands out saying, I'm going to take. I want people coming into this country going after the American dream and going after opportunities. And that's why I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, because he's going to change us back to not a country of handouts, but a handout of opportunities. And that's why this person came to the country and his family came to the country to begin with. And I think that those comments, so much is made of them. But at the end of the day, we've known Donald Trump for 9 years. He's made comment after comment after comment, and it doesn't get held against him as it does in others because he doesn't claim to be anything perfect. He knows he's crass.
Right.
Everybody knows he's going to go in and blow things up. Everybody knows he's going to say something inappropriate. If you decide to support him, it's not like you're going to walk away. And those undecided voters are such it's 2 to 3%. Is an undecided voter going to walk away from him because of that joke? Or is an undecided voter going to stay
Which
home?
he didn't make. Which he didn't
make,
by the way.
and most people
And
over
then
there
finally you
didn't
said
care.
turnout is up, you said. And I'm assuming that's Pennsylvania and a lot of places, rural voters. Again, that's good for Trump, right?
That's very good for Trump. Yeah. I look,
All right.
and so, but there's also, you look at the New York Times Siena poll that just came out, and it looks worse for Donald Trump than any of the other polls. But then the New York Times Siena poll sort of been an outlier the whole time. You're seeing the Iowa poll, and you're wondering, is that an outlier? Can all these be outliers? I hate to say it's too close to call because it's not my job to say that, but it feels like this is so tenuous that anything can happen. And the only thing that I keep going back to is in 2016 and 2020, Donald Trump overperformed the polls in every state, and not just by a little bit, by more than the points, on the chart right now.
And Lee,
so if that
happened again, if that happened again in 2024, it'd be a landslide victory for Trump.
That's right. That is absolutely right. And I think, we can blame pollsters all we want for that, But I think we also have to look at the rhetoric that we're using around the country and how we talk about each other. I mean, I saw one poll talking about polls being inaccurate, but 28% of voters say that they have lied to a family member about who they're voting for, because that's where we are as a country, because we judge each other so horribly that we feel like we have to lie to each other. So why are you going to tell a pollster the truth if you can't even tell your mother or your brother or your family member the truth about who you're going to vote? This is where we are. We have decided that if you disagree with us politically, the other side is evil, no matter what side you're on. And that makes an incredibly difficult environment to get people to tell us the truth. It also makes an incredibly difficult environment to make a decision, because so many people are hardwired to make decisions just along, party line or based on how they were raised. And if you differ now, it's a totally different game. This is such a hard place to be, that it's more than a polling problem. It's a national problem that we can't even talk to each other.
That is really fascinating perspective. Lee Carter, the president of Maslansky Partners, language strategist, researcher. You always see her on Fox highlighting the polls when it comes out to instant reaction, often when it comes to the debates or a speech. She also has a book out, Persuasion, Convincing Others When Facts Don't Seem to Matter. Lee, a great conversation. I look forward to having you again soon on The Will Cain Show.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great to see you.
All right. There she goes. All right. That's a huge edition of The Will Cain Show. And guess what? It's only bigger tomorrow. 10 a.m., YouTube, Facebook, FoxNews.com. 2 hours. Clay Travis, Buck Sexton, Dave Portnoy, many, many more tomorrow on The Will Cain Show. Subscribe at YouTube. Set a reminder on Facebook. And if you miss us live, subscribe on Apple or Spotify. I will see you again next time on The Will Cain Show.